What is up? Welcome into this beautiful Wednesday edition of Pushing the Pile, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Got a jam-packed show for you guys. We got our first off the ball segment, talking a little hip drop. Joe Mixon upset about what happened to him. Talking Chiefs signing Kareem Hunt. We're also going to go into our deep dives. We're going to do that every single Wednesday with Leger Douzable, obviously, joining us. And we have our mailbag segment to close it off. So let's get right into the first off the ball, where Joe Mixon was upset. He took to Twitter after he was hip dropped. The point of emphasis this offseason, supposedly, and said the NFLPA made it a rule and emphasis for a reason. Time to put your money where your mouth is. Do we think this point of emphasis, where obviously they outlawed it after, it was Mark Andrews' injury a year ago and hip drop, famously Logan Wilson taking him down, not flagging it here? I don't know if I've seen it flagged yet in the NFL. Yeah. Is this the new running backs can't drop their heads, where it's like, oh, we're trying to protect the players, we're doing everything, but then we're never actually going to call it?
Yeah, Mike, it's so interesting. We were having a candid conversation before we went on live, and it's such a subjective call. I had the pleasure of talking to Walt Anderson, who is now the VP of officiating in the NFL. And this was the first question I asked him, right? How is this going to be officiated? Because as a defensive player, if I'm chasing a guy from behind or even at an angle, right, and I try to tackle him from behind, and he's continuing to turn his legs to move forward, and then I just fall down, like, are you going to call hip drop tackle on that? He was like, well, from what you said, Leger, that's not a hip drop tackle. So in my head, I'm like, well, that's essentially what we've been seeing, every Sunday, Monday, or Thursday, right? So it's just like, it's such a gray area rule, and it's so subjective. And I think that's why it hasn't been called, because the game is so fast, and it's hard to tell if somebody, what they say, unweights their hips and then falls down. I understand Joe Mixon being upset. Joe Mixon is a dude that is built like an ox in his lower half, so he's hard to bring down. So as a defender, it's just like, it's tough when an offensive player, again, his weight is pushing him forward. You're trying to stop him from getting extra yards. It's like, how do you tackle somebody when you're in chase mode, right? And again, people will say, well, you should be in a better position. Well, this is football. Like, guys get paid on the other side too. So I don't think it will get called. I think we'll see what we've seen already. Guys will get fine letters in the mail because it's such a subjective rule.
I think it's like yards after catch has become such a huge thing in the NFL now. And the biggest fear for these guys at the second and third levels of defense is, if I don't make that tackle, he might hit his head on the goalpost. So I think the big fear for a lot of these defenders, and it's kind of a sticky situation to the point you made, it used to be guys would be drugged down the field, Literally. So they found a way to progress as tacklers to be able to get guys on the ground. So now we're seeing the best athletes on earth find a way to get guys down. They're tackling the other best athletes on the field. Sometimes you have to do things that can look dangerous, that can look malicious, but at the end of the day, they're trying to do their job. They're trying to get these guys on the ground. And when you see them swing underneath the guys and bring them down, sometimes it looks bad. Yeah. And sometimes you get injuries. That's unfortunate. I mean, injuries happen in the NFL every play. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where, was it intentional? Was he malicious? Was he trying to hurt this guy, or was he just trying to get his job done? Correct. And I remember in the old days, it used to be the gang tackles, right? Like one guy hanging off a jersey that was outstretched 5 yards, and then the other three guys come on him. Yeah. Now one guy can get this guy down, but the technique looks like a hip drop sometimes. Sure.
I will say there's sometimes, there's a few things here, like a 175-pound corner going against the 260-pound tight end. Sometimes that's all you got, right? Sometimes all you have to do is just let your body weight try to take his legs out when you're hanging on for a tackle for dear life. But I do think, the Logan Wilson one specifically, and he was a guy who grew up in South Dakota. Maybe he was roping cattle. Like, that's what it looks like when he was coming into guys, where he was literally coming
off to the side
with his hip.
That's what I talked about. Like the
completely unweighted from the start. I think getting rid of that, or at least trying to say, hey, that's not our first option, is a good thing. And I think you can see those when they're bad. But when it's a guy who kind of uses it as a secondary option when he's already hanging on for dear life to try to get a guy down, I'm not sure we're going to see that get enforced.
So it's the initiation. It's the initiation of the technique that can dictate it.
I think that's probably what we're going to see going forward.
I think that's a good point, because the end always looks like hip drop. The end always looks like hip drop, especially if you're at a disadvantage in size. Correct. But to your point, there's some guys who are really good at setting these hip drop tackles up. That's what they're going to keep an eye on.
Well, I think it depends on the angle you're running from, because like the Logan Wilson one, when I saw it on tape multiple times, he's coming from the pile, right, inside out. right? Mark Andrews was on the right. He's running this way. Logan Wilson's running this way. And I get what you're saying as far as running and like maybe turning and flipping your hips up before you make contact with him. But again, Mark Andrews is what, 265, 270?
Yeah.
It's just like, what is a linebacker supposed to do? You're trying to prevent him from getting extra yards. So if he doesn't do that and he holds on to him, it's like you said, does he get dragged 5 yards and they pick up a first down? Again, you don't want anybody getting hurt, right? We're all out here to compete against each other.
But we don't want him to get first downs either.
Exactly. Like you said, we got to do our jobs.
Yeah.
We're trying to prevent guys from getting yards. So it's just like, as a defender, like, what do you do?
Yeah, I'm an O-lineman. So when this rule first came about, I was like, great, more offensive players are going to be healthy. There's going to be less injuries. But now I can see it as, from the defensive side of things. There's a gray area.
Yeah.
There's a big gray area.
We had a listener ask, do we think this should be a reviewable call? What are your guys' thoughts?
I don't think they want to slow the game down.
I agree.
Honestly. And again, we were talking before we came on live, and Jamar Chase thought he was hip drop tackle. And once you look at the replay, he wasn't. So it's just like, if they review that and it's not a hit, like you're slowing the game down and you throw an unnecessary flag. So I don't think it should be reviewed.
I think there's some value in here potentially because, to the point that bald guy says here in this tweet, there's 4 things to look for before declaring it a penalty. We can take a look at that in the same way, in the same light that we look at incompletions versus completions, feet inbounds. You have to look at this thing slowly. And also it'll answer the questions for those offensive players who are bitching about getting hip dropped immediately. It'd be like, okay, you can cut that out because we just looked at it and it's not what you thought it was. Now, obviously, there is still gray area. There's still gray area on, was your plan to hip drop? Were you trying to trap that lower leg with your hip? So
I think it's a reactionary thing that happens.
But to you guys' point, I mean, it's just going to take too long. There's I don't want to be up till 12:30 on a Thursday night.
We tried reviewing penalties with PI that one year. It stunk.
Yeah,
everyone hated it. Let's not go back to that. I think the one thing, if you're going to do any sort of reviews on penalties, have a sky judge who's literally just watching the tape.
Correct.
Who immediately after the play can be like, that was a flag. We can wait 10 seconds to throw it after the fact, but don't go to a full review. That's stupid. Yeah. All right. Next in the first off the ball here, Chiefs signing Kareem Hunt, former Chief, back when he was 2017 draft, went for 1,327 yards as a rookie. Only lasted a couple years there, though, before obviously the video came out of him kicking a woman in the face at a hotel in Cleveland, Ohio, I believe it was cut, played with the Browns the last 5 seasons before, out in the free agent market now. Is this going to move the needle? He's still only 29 years old, not a lot of tread on the tires, only 1,030 attempts in his career. What do we expect here? Because obviously Isaiah Pacheco on IR now.
I think nobody knows this guy better than Andy Reid, and we know how Andy Reid can. I always called it the land of misfit toys.
Yeah,
that's the Kansas City Chiefs. Like you think about a guy like Travis, who was almost kicked out of college and had to find his way, and then he ends up in a locker room like Kansas City, and even think about guys like Tyreek Hill, and the list goes on. Frank Clark. These are all dudes that we don't.
I never actually thought about how many they had.
Like all these guys.
We don't know where these guys go after 5 o'clock. You and I have had teammates where you're going to get I'm one of those guys. I'm seriously, like when I leave the building, you don't know where I'm going to go. But from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. when we got these guys in the building,
They're locked in.
They're on Andy Reid's playbook.
Yeah.
They're on the same page with Andy Reid. And sometimes Andy's on a different page with every single one of these guys because that's how well he's able to relate to his players. I think for Kareem Hunt, it's going to be, are you healthy enough? Are you fresh enough? And what were you doing in this offseason to be able to stay in shape? You come into that Chiefs building and you're going to be running all day, every day in practice, and then the same thing on Sundays. So are they going to trust Carson Steele immediately with the lion's share of these carries? Obviously, with Pacheco out with the broken leg, there's going to be some time where they got to fill this void at running back. The other guy I got a question about, Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon, number one, you've come to know him as the pass catcher, third down specialist in Andy Reid's offense. I haven't seen him on the field. I think he might be a free agent right now.
Yeah.
That's a guy you bring in.
Right.
That's a dude that they lean on in the postseason runs and was a big player in Super Bowls before. Right. So whether it's Kareem Hunt taking the handoffs on first and second down, bring a guy like Jerick McKinnon in too, and now you got a third down back.
I think there's not a coach in the NFL that's better than Andy Reid when it comes to finding a specialized role for each player on his team. Right, you just talked about Jerick McKinnon, who I was going to bring up. Like, he had a specialized role on that team. He was the third down back. Kareem Hunt, when he was with the Chiefs, a lot of people consider him maybe the best back in the NFL. Now, again, that was some years ago. So I guarantee Andy Reid will have a specialized role for him. once he gets up to snuff, right? He's on practice squad right now, probably a few weeks. They want to make sure that he's acclimated in regards to being in shape to play an NFL game.
But the playbook's not an issue.
Yeah, no, he'll know that.
Yeah,
he'll know that. And then you talk about Carson Steele. Can they lean on him? He's a guy that did have a fumble, but I think it says something that they trusted him enough to continue to give him carries after that, right? And Samaje Perine is the guy who essentially is their third down back right now. But I think you lose a lot when you lose a guy like Isaiah Pacheco. We were talking about this again before we came on live with you guys, that when you look at Patrick Mahomes and his performance this past week versus the Bengals, he only threw for 151 yards, right? Didn't force anything down. Now, I think that first interception, he was trying to force it to Travis Kelce in the middle. Didn't see the linebacker, Davis Gaither, and he ends up getting the interception. The Cam Taylor-Britt interception was just a ridiculous play by him. That was one-on-one coverage.
They get paid too.
Exactly. That was a ridiculous play. But we talked about this before, Kyle. Whatever Mahomes the Chiefs need to win, that's the Mahomes he needs to be. And essentially that's what he was Sunday versus the Bengals. He managed the game, right? They ran the ball when they were in the two-high shell. He dinked and dunked. He did take the shot to Rashee Rice. Trying to take another one to Xavier Worthy. Cam Britt made a heck of a play. But I think this hurts because with Isaiah Pacheco, you kind of know if you have a light box, you're most likely getting 4 or 5 yards every play.
Yeah.
Will they be able to do that or replicate that with Carson Steele, Samaje Perine, or Kareem Hunt? That's the question for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think Kareem Hunt doesn't move the needle, in my opinion. I still think they lack – what they're going to lack is that home run hitting ability that Pacheco had, the speed he has in the open field. But Kareem Hunt ain't that. I mean, he averaged 3 yards a carry last year for the Browns. That's why he was still available. So for the Chiefs, I mean, no one's pushing the panic button here. But it's definitely – they're going to take a hit from that Pacheco injury, in my opinion. All right. We're going to take a quick break. After we do that, we're going to get into some of our deep dives. We're going to talk about the Saints. Real or fake. We're going to talk about Bryce Young because we haven't really touched on him getting benched much in the show just yet. And we're going to talk about rookie quarterbacks. Do you start them? Do you bench them? Do you give them a redshirt year? How do we treat that? We're going to go deep
Put them in
on all three of
bubble
those.
wrap.
Today, with the support of the NFL, a new playbook is being written. The National Gay Flag Football League provides inclusive play for over 4,000 LGBTQ plus players and allies. Here is a home with no penalty for being you.
All right, let's talk about Bryce Young because we kind of messed up. The news happened Monday when we were on our CBS Sports Network show, me and Kyle. So we talked about it then, but you guys probably haven't heard our takes on it. We didn't talk about it yesterday. So we want to go deep into it because this is unique, man. I mean, they had the 9th overall pick back in 2023. They gave up a ton, a haul to go up to number 1, the Carolina Panthers, to the Chicago Bears, including not only a future first rounder, but also that ended up being the number 1 overall pick, but also DJ Moore, who ended up being their best receiver that Bryce Young could have used, right?
And a second round pick still coming.
They gave up a lot of stuff, but I want to talk more about not necessarily the Panthers, but about Bryce Young and just what happened here. Because I go back to his draft eval, and after he got benched, the news came out, I watched some of his college tape because I was high on him. I had him as the number 1 player on my board. Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network had him as the number 1 overall player. Dane Brugler of The Athletic had him as the number 1 overall player. Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, the 2 ESPN guys, had him at number 1 overall. Lance Zierlein of NFL Network had him number 1. Rick Spielman, our colleague here at CBS Sports Network, said he's everything you want in a quarterback, an A+ across the board, except for the height. Young will be the exception to the rule, though. So everyone believed. Not everyone. There were some doubters, but like even the doubters would have taken him in the first round. They may have just preferred Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud more. Is it the height here? I went back and watched this Texas game specifically, which was one of like the biggest stages. That was from his junior year that he kind of didn't have a great game, ended up winning it with a 4th quarter drive. And I think you saw some of the under pressure, just skittishness that he couldn't stand in and deliver against bigger guys, in collapsing pockets. Yeah. That he was scared of that. And then you saw kind of impact other throws in that game where it wasn't necessarily pressure, but it was a little tighter pocket. And he had that in his game. But it was a rarity. And you saw throws on tape, even in that game, that were better throws under pressure than I think he's ever made at the NFL level. And so did the Panthers do him wrong? Is it true? Can you just not succeed when you're 5'10" unless you're an elite athlete like Kyler Murray and can truly create these outside of structure plays consistently? Or was were people just wrong in the eval of Bryce Young? What do you think it was?
I heard, I was listening to some old clips, and obviously, like, Stephen A. was posting what he was thinking about the Bryce Young pick. And he said, I met this young man, and he was so small.
He's like, I'm bigger than him.
He's like, he was so small.
Yeah.
Like, it was like he felt bad for him in the moment. And then in the 2 box, it was Stephen A. and Nick Saban. And I heard Nick Saban talk about it. And he said, look, he's not the ideal size for a quarterback, but at the end of the day, he plays quarterback like a point guard. And it seemed to me now in retrospect, looking at that interview, you can tell that Nick Saban's really doing his guy Bryce Young a solid. And obviously the eval spoke for itself, and he was the number 1 player in the country on a lot of people's boards. But at the end of the day, you can just see with that Nick Saban interview that he was trying to do his guy a solid, and he felt like he was being slighted about his slight in stature quarterback. But when you get to the National Football League, it's hard enough to consume and retain and understand all the information. You bring it to another level when you're the quarterback, and you have to then spit it back out at your team, and you've got to be the leader on the field. Everything goes as your quarterback goes. Yeah. How many coordinators do they have? How many coaches has he had now?
Yeah, I mean, had fired midseason, so a new guy midseason and a new guy.
I was an offensive lineman, and it was really hard for me in the National Football League early on because of the fact that we had a different coordinator every year. We had a different head coach every 2 years. My O-line coach changed every other year. So from a technical standpoint, to the language we're speaking, to the guys you're playing with, because there is turnover every time that there's roster changes. There's new guys in and out of that huddle. You have to be on the same page, especially when you're a quarterback. You got to trust the guys around you. I never thought that the trust was there between Bryce Young, his teammates, the ownership, the management, the way they set this thing up for him. It was doomed to fail from the very beginning, to be honest. And you can see it now, a quarterback that's been beaten and bruised both mentally, emotionally, and physically too. And now, to your point, he's seeing ghosts. He's not getting through his progression. He's bailing out of the pocket before things even do get sketchy. And they will get sketchy if you hold it another 2 beats, Bryce. So you're onto something. Your instinct is telling you the right thing. But at the end of the day, you got to rehabilitate this young man's mental because the confidence, when it takes a hit in the NFL, it's really tough to get it back. Because, look, you got to go to practice the next day. And, if you throw an interception, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't hit your second progression, and you hear about it in the meeting, you say, well, he's probably right. I'm just not seeing it fast enough. Is this true? Like, are they right? You know what I'm saying? That's the battle as an NFL player. Confidence. Have no confidence. Have no continuity. That's why I really have an issue with this Canales benching Bryce Young. Is it even Canales? Probably upstairs. Because we know one thing about Dave Canales. He's going to give quarterbacks a shot. And I haven't seen this guy have a shot, whether it's Bryce's doing or the upstairs doing. And we're not going to see it anytime soon. It's sad. It's sad to me. It's sad.
There's so much to break down when it comes to this Bryce Young situation. I think something that you said, Mike, that was telling was what Rick Spielman said, this guy has everything that you want except the height, right? And for NFL standards, right, most people are under the assumption or they look at the past and say, I have had to seen it before done in this type of body for me to feel comfortable to do it. Like, so it's rare for the NFL to go outside of that realm in regards to taking somebody one over. Now, Baker Mayfield wasn't the biggest guy. Still, he was more stockier. Same thing with Kyler Murray, more stockier than Bryce Young.
So Kyler and Bryce both 5'10" and 1/8 inch.
Yeah.
So they're same height. Russell Wilson 5'11".
Kyler's makeup
Kyler and
is denser.
Russ are stronger.
That's what I'm saying. So
Dense.
like when you look at Bryce Young, not only is he shorter, but he's more frail in body type too. So we're always under the precipice. Like, I'm one of those big guys. Like, I've had to seen it before for me to believe that it can happen. Like, everybody thinks they're the exception to the rule. No, everybody's not the exception to the rule. The rule is the rule for a reason.
Yes.
And I love, like you said, I love Bryce Young's film as far as anticipation, what it could do off platform, the toughness that he showed. But the biggest scare for me was his size, right? And he didn't have crazy arm talent as well either, but he threw with so much anticipation. You thought maybe you could supersede that, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that facet of it, right? Then go back to what you're saying. This has been quarterback malpractice by the Carolina Panthers. This kid has had to go through 2 different systems in 2 years as a rookie quarterback, right? And then when you look at it, for rookie quarterbacks that have success, what is around them? What is around them to make them succeed? What are you bringing in to help them succeed? I had a show last year that I did with two other analysts, and they asked us the question, out of all the rookie quarterbacks drafted last year, it was C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Bryce Young, which quarterback was set up to have success? I don't want to put out the other analysts, but they said they thought Bryce because of Frank Wright and everybody being there, the coaching staff that were ex-players.
Yeah.
But you know why I said CJ? And it wasn't because of what I saw on film. It's because of the offensive line. For a young quarterback, the one thing you have to have, and it's paramount for that kid to have confidence, is protection. And right, they had just traded for Shaq Mason. They had one of the best, if not the best left tackle in football, Laramie Tunsil. Titus Howard was almost a Pro Bowl player, like caliber player. So when I looked at the offensive line, I said, CJ's going to be well more protected than any of these quarterbacks in the draft. It's rare that the second overall pick has a solid offensive line like that, right? So I said CJ Stroud is going to be set up for the most success, right? When you look at everything Bryce Young went through last year, you talked about it. He was taking shots left and right. Now, again, this year, he's taking some of those shots that he shouldn't be, and it's on him. One that comes to mind was just last week versus the Chargers. J.C. Horn gets an interception. They're in plus territory. It's 3rd and 5 on the 36-yard line. He evades some pressure, goes to the left instead of just throwing the football away, because maybe they do go for it on 4th down in plus territory. He takes a ridiculous shot on the sideline, and now they have to punt the ball. Like, those are things that is on the quarterback and not on the offense. But my thing is, you said after only 2 games, they benched this kid. Like, what does that do for his mental going forward? And what has Dave Canales seen in the offseason during training camp and in 2 games that makes him say that we have to make a change right now, right? And to your point, is it above Canales?
Yeah,
right?
I have trust issues now in that locker room. If Dave Canales, the head coach, says after the week 2 loss, Bryce Young is still our quarterback, if I'm an O-lineman that had a rough game, I'm worried about maybe Tepper steps over Dave Canales' head. Now I'm out of a job. And, let's not get it confused. Dave Canales knows football more than David Tepper. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if the guy that knows less football is making decisions for your football team, which you're the head coach of, there's trust issues all over the board here, from players, from the staff, from upstairs. People are probably in the same meeting rooms with Tepper. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody trusts it, and that's why it's such a friggin' fire. It's a fire right now.
Yeah, and even to add to that, they started releasing some players. They released their leading sack leader just this week. So it's just like, what is going on with the Carolina Panthers? Again, I think it's been malpractice what they're going through. Yes, Bryce hasn't played well, but they also didn't set him up for success.
Nobody would.
Yeah, and I think that's both can be true in that the situation is, about as bad as anyone stepped into. Trevor Lawrence stepped into a pretty terrible situation with that. And Urban Meyer year 1, what we saw there with that staff was bad, and that set him back too. Like, that set his career back. His rookie year was god-awful, and it took him through probably till the end of the second year for it to really start to look better. And so with Bryce, I think it's pretty clear, though, that the size was underrated by pretty much everyone that had him number 1, myself included, that ended up really at the end of the day when pressure did hit. Now, if he goes to a situation, maybe he had the Eagles offensive line right out the gate, maybe we never see it, right? Maybe we never see him turn into this, and maybe he turns into what everyone hoped he would. But I do think that as soon as the pressure became consistent, if he was Anthony Richardson size, it wouldn't have looked like this. Like, he would not have gone down the downward spiral that we're seeing him.
It's like when Mina Kimes took a picture with him at the combine. It was like
she tried to help him out.
It was like, he is really a little guy.
Like, I had like 5-inch heels on.
He's really a little guy.
So that leads us though into what your deep dive was here.
Yep.
And that's rookie quarterbacks.
Start them, sit them, develop them, bubble wrap them.
I'll just give my take right off the top here with this, because I've been banging the table now for a while that the Strouds, the Herberts, the Mayfields, those are unicorns.
That's not real.
It's not, and there's never
the exception.
There's never been a rookie lead a team to a Super Bowl. And so, like, the risk reward at this point of throwing a guy to the wolves right out the gate is just low. It's just like, the risk is high, the reward is low. You're just not getting that much by getting those reps. And I think the biggest thing that doesn't get talked about is that the offseason going into your rookie year is the shortest offseason of your life as a quarterback.
Yep.
You have May until August 1, 3 months to get up to speed in the playbook, and then you're on a football field playing against NFLers. It's not only shortest offseason of your life, it is also the only offseason of your life where every single you're playing with is new. You do not have anyone you had before. If you're at a college team, some guys leave, but a lot of guys stay. NFL team, some guys leave, a lot of guys stay. High school, similarly, you have to learn everybody's name. You have to learn who all these guys are, get on the same page with all your wide receivers, and to expect.
You don't have to know their name. You also have to know every check that they could run, every
and
route
how
concept,
they run routes,
hand signals to give it to them, snap counts.
And to expect someone to just hit the ground running. The unicorns do. Again, like the ones that can, they're special, and that's how you know if a guy plays well as a rookie, chances are you got something special on your hands. But it's one where I do think we see a lot of bad habits develop from certain quarterbacks, and that it's something that if they truly had the offense mastered before they ever took a snap, there's just such a strong track record of those guys that are asked to do that, whether it's Lamar Jackson, whether it's Jalen Hurts, whether it's Jordan Love, whether it's Patrick Mahomes, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, whether it's Phillip Rivers. There's a litany of guys. Carson Palmer had a full redshirt year as the number 1 overall pick of the Cincinnati Bengals. It's just like
Eli didn't start right away.
Like there's so many guys.
It was Kurt.
At this point,
I forget that he was there.
Kurt Warner, yeah.
That's crazy.
I think the evidence is overwhelming. I actually was at a Giants-Packers game that year where it was 0-0 at halftime. It was one of the hardest games to watch. Kurt Warner slid at the goal line on a 4th down, and they called him short. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. But it's just the track record, I think, is so strongly weighted towards the guys that get the chance to sit and get up to speed in the NFL that I don't know why these franchises insist that this guy has to be our starter.
Biggest recent, like the recent busts and strugglers, I hate the word bust, but the recent quarterbacks that struggled, that started, played a lot immediately. Bryce Young did not sit. Zach Wilson barely sat. Trey Lance hurt when replacing a hurt Jimmy G. Jared Goff sat half a year, went 0-7. Jameis Winston did not sit. Josh Rosen did not sit. Marcus Mariota did not sit. Sam Darnold did not sit. Got mono, actually, probably from a club in New York City, as you guys know very much about. Then I think about the most recent GOATs. Patrick Mahomes. He had one of the most savvy, veteran, well-loved quarterbacks that was going to be okay with having a rookie guy in his building, like Alex Smith. Tom Brady sat the first year. Aaron Rodgers sat the first year, obviously famously behind Brett Favre. But when you're a team that is being asked to draft a savior, and I hate that we have Caleb Williams up here, but when you're a team like Chicago and you're one quarterback away, and you've got a good defense and you've got some pieces around them on offense, you're gonna want to throw that first pick out, throw your hat in the ring for the first pick, because that's what's going to be in your mind what helps your team. I think that the bust potential goes up obviously so much higher when you're a top of the first round quarterback. If you don't have an immediate need at quarterback, but you feel like you could bolster your roster, you can maybe get one end of the first round, second round. Now the pressure's off that guy. That's not going to be the cover article every single week. Every time that there's a media release, it's not going to be a Caleb Williams highlight of him getting sacked. So in my opinion, when I think about the Chicago Bears situation, I didn't realize how poorly that offensive line was going to play. Obviously, they put the pieces in place on the exterior at the skill positions to make life easy for a guy like Caleb Williams to be able to go through his progressions and hit any number of guys that are different archetypes in the receiver community. You've got a route runner, you've got a deep threat, you've got an underneath guy, you've got a little bit of everything in Chicago. But it's become so evident to me that if you don't have the complete roster, if you don't have an offensive line, you'll never give these guys the time of day. And to your point about the risk reward, what's the reward of starting a rookie quarterback? Well, obviously it's not going to be Super Bowl because no rookie quarterback has ever won the Super Bowl. So you're looking at maybe like a good season will be 9 wins and people will be happy with your pick. Well, what's the risk of having a guy like Caleb Williams out there? Let me ask you that. What is the risk? The risk is what is going on with Bryce Young. We're looking into the future there as Bear fans, and we're saying whatever we do not let that happen. So I've heard people talking about firing the O-line coach, fire Eberflus, get all these guys out of here. Well, the one thing you want is continuity. I'm saying don't panic fire anybody. You have to build this offensive lineup. You have to have a confident group in front of Caleb Williams. And even if they're not confident, have them on the same page. Having these guys on the same page, if we're all wrong, if one guy's wrong, we all have to be wrong the same way to make it right. I think it's too much pressure on these guys. I was all about drafting Caleb Williams, having him start, and I said 9 wins would be a fabulous year. I'd be very happy with that. I still think it's within the cards to get 7 or 8 wins for this Chicago team. They've got a great defense. They've got guys at the receiver position, but you got to protect these dudes. To your point about CJ Stroud going to Houston, there's a reason there's success there, okay? You may not know Laramie Tunsil's name at home, but I promise you every defensive edge rusher in the National Football League does, and I promise you every O-lineman does. And every guy that plays quarterback wants a group like that to protect them.
Yeah, and there was one of the mailbag questions, so we'll just answer now. Someone asked, do you think Caleb Williams pulls it together at any point this season? I don't. Like, it's because of just where his kind of weaknesses lie in like protecting himself under pressure and having that confidence that like we literally have been saying since his USC tape. It's like that was things that had to change. And for him to be playing a lot behind this objectively awful interior offensive line so far, that I don't see pulling it together. If they're not going to pull it together, Caleb's only going to like get more ingrained in those bad habits. You think he's going to want to sit in a pocket and go to his third read?
I'm going to get
behind that
7 times.
He's not going to.
Can't get to your third read.
He's flat, exactly. Like
it's
he's
snap, sprint.
So pulling it together for him is going to look like more accurate plays outside of structure. And if you kind of ingrain that thought process that everyone was saying, he's great at, but he has to do less of, if you're ingraining that thought process into him, that's the worst thing you could do for a young quarterback. And why, I don't know if you saw the clip of CJ Stroud after the game.
Yeah.
Say, hey, you got to protect himself.
Correct.
I didn't love Caleb's reaction to that. It's like, Caleb's got to be Caleb's like, yeah, this again. It's like, yeah, Caleb, this again. Like that is the one thing that actually has to like change, or else you're going to have.
There's some exceptions.
He can obviously like the Bryce Young. We're not putting that on him by any means, but like this is the same things we were saying about Bryce Young at this time last year, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'll give Caleb a little grace just because you know how usually after a loss, I don't really want to talk to anybody.
100%, especially on prime time.
Exactly. So it's if he heard the message, that's great. Mm-hmm. I'm like you, Mike. I wasn't 100% sold or happy about his response, but I get it because I've been in that scenario where somebody's trying to tell me something after a loss. I don't want to talk to anybody, right? So getting to this conversation, should a rookie quarterback play or sit? It's so interesting, right? Because this has been brought up, I would say, over the last 20 years. And when this all started to become an issue? It was my rookie year in 2008. Because before that, when you were drafted in the first round, sit your butt on the bench and learn how to be a pro. That's literally what they would do with the quarterback position. We named some of the quarterbacks, Eli Manning, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, obviously he had a future Hall of Famer in front of him, so he wasn't going to play in front of Brett Favre. But even guys that went high in the draft, Phillip Rivers, they sat down for a whole year or a good portion of the year before they took over the mantle as starting quarterback. But it was when Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco got drafted and they had success. Yep. Owners were like, oh, wait a minute. We don't have to sit our rookies. We don't have to pay 2 guys a lot of money. We could play our rookies right away. And then it doubled down the next year because Matt Stafford and Mark Sanchez, my guy, Mark Sanchez,
the AFC Championship game.
Exactly. Went to the AFC. So owners are sitting back, oh, we don't have to pay 2 quarterbacks. We could just pay a rookie.
That's a great point.
We'll bring in, a veteran guy to help him like get acclimated to the system, and we're going to push him out there. And then it literally was a snowball effect after that because then you get Andrew Luck, and you talked about it. It's rare for a number 1 pick to be thrust into a situation where everything is right for him to succeed.
It was Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert. That's my exceptions to the rule.
So those guys elevated their team. So owners are like, hold on, we got a rookie quarterback that can elevate us. Play good football, go to the playoffs, and then RG3 too. You can throw him in there.
Oh, I missed.
They went to the playoffs. They won the division his rookie year. So it's just like owners are sitting back like, oh, I don't have to pay 2 quarterbacks now. Which was the worst thing they could have ever done, right? Yeah. Because the hit rate is total opposite ends of the spectrum in regards to those exceptions that we just talked about and the quarterbacks that they, quote unquote, want to call bust.
And those are physical outliers.
Exactly. Too. Like Andrew Luck was a house.
And smarter than the head coach.
RG3 was an exceptional athlete.
Track.
Exactly. So it's just like, that was the issue. It started my draft class in 2008 where owners were like, oh, we could play rookie quarterbacks and actually have success. And then it doubled down the next year with Mark Sanchez and Stafford and just kept becoming a snowball effect. And they forgot all the other quarterbacks in between that went in the first round that didn't pan out because they didn't sit and learn how to be a pro first behind a veteran guy and learn what it means to be an NFL quarterback. Now, all of a sudden, guys are bust. No, they weren't thrust in the right situations to have success.
It's like Sam Bradford was a friggin' awesome quarterback. Great quarterback, great thrower of the football, but you throw him in that St. Louis locker room with that offensive line.
Still got paid a couple times.
Got paid a couple times because that's how good he was. Because that's how good he was. But, you know, you're not going to be able to maximize the potential unless you have this complementary roster set up, or you're just one of these rare freaks like Andrew Luck who can see things before they happen and is physically gifted enough to make them happen. Caleb Williams, you know what his superpower is? Creativity. You know, it looks great when he does it. His ability to throw off platform. In my opinion, that's not a physical gift. Like, that's not a physical superpower like the other names on this list. Justin Herbert, Andrew Luck. These guys are so much. Cam Newton. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You can't replicate that. You can't replicate that.
I'll just say this. I'll end on this. Which two franchises that drafted rookie quarterbacks in the first round are probably fan bases are happiest right now? It's the Vikings and it's the Patriots, in my opinion. Both those teams. I mean, just objectively 100%. From what they saw in the preseason to them being on the bench and their team still doing well, they're probably happy as heck right now. No question. So I do think there is something to, and now every situation is different, but the vast majority of first rounders, just give them that time.
Let them develop, man. But the thing is, Mike, they're going to continue to make this mistake because of classes like the 2020 class.
Yeah.
Where every first round pick hit in that class. And then even the second round pick with Jalen Hurts. So we'll continue to see owners say, like, nah, the guy needs to go play now. Even though the track record of the history shows that guys that go out there early, it doesn't really bode well for them to have success.
I do think, though, if Bryce didn't work out, and Caleb falls the same fate, we will see a change. Like, that will be enough that everyone's like, I can't go down that same route, because you then like.
So you're saying we could see Chicago go to Tyson Bagent?
Well, I'm saying should a year from now Caleb's in it looking similarly to Bryce Young, draft sort of strategy will change across owners across the league. They'll just be like, I don't want to be that laughing stock that the Carolina Panthers were.
And it's funny because we were like, when I say we, the Bears were the laughing stock because they couldn't get this quarterback pick right for so long.
Yeah,
and they had no choice but to take that guy, because if they don't take that guy and he becomes the next Patrick Mahomes, then it's the same conversation we were having 7-8 years ago when Trubisky got picked over Mahomes. And I lived through that in that locker room, and Mitch is my guy and a really good quarterback, but you're never going to be Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
So like this is the fine line these management ownership are walking right now.
All right, Leger, what's your deep dive here?
Are the Saints legit, guys? I know we were kind of teasing about this last week because we were like, oh, they played the Carolina Panthers. They had 30 in the first half. They can't be legit. We'll see what they're really like when they go to Dallas, right? The big star and everything. And they straight walked up into Dallas's home, kicked the door down, had a nice sandwich on their couch, kicked their shoes off, put their feet on the coffee table, and just had their way with the Dallas Cowboys. But I think the thing that makes them so legit is the change they made at the offensive coordinator position, Clint Kubiak. I mean, we were talking about this, Kyle. We wondered how the Saints would play because of the O-line issues, or we thought was going to be the O-line issues.
Yeah.
Talise Fuaga has been amazing, which we kind of figured he would. We knew he would develop, right? The biggest question was Trevor Penning.
Yep.
But the thing is, we haven't been able to see his weaknesses.
They've covered it up.
Because Clint Kubiak has covered him up. Like, literally, like, they were able to run the ball any which way they wanted versus the Dallas Cowboys, which, again, why I don't know the Cleveland Browns didn't try this same attack. But I think the thing that surprised me, Kyle and Mike, was that usually you don't want to run on the perimeter versus Dallas because they're so fast. Like the Mariano Overshown, Kendrick is a very smart player, but he has some speed as well. Like teams like that, you kind of want to run right at them. No, they got on the edge on toss plays, stretch, zone, and they really honed in to Trevor Penning's athletic ability as a run blocker, right? He was able to get to the second level. Talise Fuaga was owning guys at the line of scrimmage, right? And then they would switch it up and go some of that inside zone and league play too and get physical with you, right? And then when they wanted to threaten the ball downfield, you know what they would do? Mass protect. That way Penning isn't on an island. 2-man routes. It's like Dallas knew what was coming. It was either a post or a seam route by Shaheed, and then Chris Olave would run a deep dig, and they couldn't stop it. They never could stop it because that linebacker, that safety was such in a bind that if he came up on the Olave dig route, Shaheed was over the top. And if he muddled in between, Shaheed would get behind him. So that's exactly what happened. So I think the Saints are legit. And the thing that we haven't even talked about, this team has always been led by its defense. Chase Young seemed like it was an amazing pickup for them. Like, I know a lot of people question with the knee, was he going to be healthy? He was unblockable on Sunday. So, like, again, you know, if you're playing with a lead and you can pin your ears back, it bodes well for that defensive line and how they're built to get after the quarterback. So, I can't believe the Saints are legit, man. Yeah. They are legit.
Saints are legit. I mean, it all comes down to whether or not they can start as fast as they've started the previous two games, because obviously with this offensive scheme, it's built around running the football, leading to Derek Carr being able to launch the ball down the field with those two speedsters. But I think if somebody can go out there and just match that intensity, drive one, get them to stop, and then, you know, go down and score, you're looking at a Saints team trailing by 7. You could be looking at Derek Carr dropping back more. I want to see Clint Kubiak's game plan when they're playing from behind. I want to see how Derek reacts. And I want to see that offensive line when everybody in the stadium knows that you're going to pass it.
Correct.
How do they handle that?
Yeah, I went back, actually watched a little. So Kubiak was OC for the Vikings in 2021.
Yep.
And the Vikings fans didn't love him that year. But I went back and watched a little, and a lot of it was the defensive struggles. And obviously they went, I think, 8-8 that year, didn't make the playoffs. But if you go back, their metrics in terms of performance were actually better that year than either of the next 2 years under Kevin O'Connell, from like an EPA per play standpoint, from a points per game standpoint. And they had an offensive line there that was Christian Darrisaw as a rookie. And he was out for a few games. They had Ole Udoh. Or not Ole Udoh. They had Rashad Hill starting at left tackle, Ezra Cleveland at left guard, Garrett Bradbury at center, Ole Udoh at right guard, and Brian O'Neill right tackle. That's one quality offensive line.
That's a unit.
It's a terrible unit that they had to scheme around that I think we didn't give him enough credit for at the time. And what he's doing now in New Orleans is kind of the next step in his development as offensive coordinator, and that this isn't objectively, no one thought this was a great unit. They're playing like a great unit because of what he's doing offensively and how he's playing to their strengths and trying to hide their weaknesses as best as possible.
Protecting his guys.
And exactly. And
that's what you want, dude.
And
that's what you want.
And they do have personnel that can run a zone-heavy scheme exceptionally well. Tyler Swaga, that's what he did at Oregon State. That's what Cesar Ruiz is best at right guard. That's what Eric McCoy is best at center. That's what their personnel is good at. And then they have legit deep threats. And so it's complementary football and how they're doing it. Again, no one's really been able to stop the run, and that's why they've been able to just do anything they wanted to offensively and not gotten into these obvious pass situations that are going to put their tackles on islands. But the way they're scheming it up right now and with the personnel they have to do that, I think they're legit. Yeah.
I mean, and another point to add, right? Who better to attack a defensive coach than a guy that played under him, right? Like Clint Kubiak was with Mike Zimmer.
He got fired in Minnesota.
Exactly. So
as
they would say, this was personal. Like he knew how to attack Mike Zimmer's defense. And again, they had no answer. We talked about it, like perimeter runs. And another thing that isn't talked about enough is Alvin Kamara wants a new deal. I mean, I haven't seen him run like this.
He's playing like it.
Oh my God. I haven't seen him run like this in like 3 years. And AK has always been one of the best pass catching backs out of the backfield, right? But it's the way he's running the football, right? And he's always had really good contact balance. Guys just seem to bounce off him and he continues to run. And then Derek Carr, right? Everybody's kind of been saying, like, this is it for him. Like, if he doesn't get it done this year, they're most likely going to move on. And will he be a starter again? So he's playing with a ton of confidence. But to your point, I would like to see, once they handle some adversity, how they bounce back, because they have not had any adversity in the first 2 games.
Play the Eagles this upcoming weekend. Eagles run defense has been suspect, so
I was going to say they're going to continue to run the football.
They may still continue to run.
Your boy, bro, Cesar was out of there. He was out there with AK on the screenplay.
Kubiak's got them boys on the sauce.
He was running.
Fastest mile per hour.
Was it?
Yeah. Of any offensive lineman in the NFL this season.
He was running.
He was cooking. All right, we're going to get to all your mailbag questions here right after a quick break.
I always ran fast.
All right, first question up here. A nice 5-star review from that podcast again.
Hey, thank you.
If you really want your question answered, we will for sure answer it.
Glad to
if
see
it's
Renner
5-star
back.
review on Apple Podcast. We don't have to have the Renner praise here at the top, but thank you for that. Jayden Daniels' debut worried me as a Commanders fan because of all the bad habits showed up all at once. Not stepping up in the pocket, always backing up, one read and tuck and run, not keeping his eyes up when scrambling to hit receivers for chunk plays, leaving clean pockets, not protecting himself when running, inaccuracy. How long do you think it takes to change these habits on the fly? A few weeks a season. Now, I would push back after week 2 on some of these for sure. Inaccuracy, I think like he missed a few deep balls week 1. Knowing what we saw from at LSU, I don't foresee that to be a problem, even if that offense hasn't been.
So did Mahomes, so did Rodgers.
Yeah, even though that offense.
Yeah.
And so not stepping up in the pocket. The biggest thing, what was the other one that I was like, I'm not sure that was a
He was saying
one.
he was leaving the pocket.
Yeah, leaving the pocket. I didn't see that in week 2, leaving the pocket
either.
under pressure. So the biggest things that I had that I think we need to see better is when forced to move, like pressure comes, when forced to move off a spot, make plays with your arm still. He is, when he moves, he turns into a runner. PFF has him charged for 25 pressure dropbacks. He's only thrown 3 completions on them. So basically, when pressure comes, he turns into a runner, and that's why.
Yeah, he is.
That's why I've been counting up his hits throughout the year. It's like that has to change because every time you turn into a runner in the upfield, chances are you're going to take a hit.
And what's one thing about him?
And he
takes big hits.
And that was the other. So that's my number 2 is he won't give up on plays. Give up on some plays. That is something that as an NFL quarterback you have to
play
do.
another
to play another down.
Yeah.
Because he is, whether it's from trying to extend when pressure comes, or whether it's trying to eke out 3 more yards down the football field when the safety's bearing down on him. Sometimes just slide, sometimes just dirt it. It's gonna save you in the long run.
Leger can tell you this, and I can see the eyes get bigger when a quarterback takes off and runs. It's a lot different than when a running back has the football. These guys want to kill.
Oh yeah,
these guys want to
kill
the quarterback. They can change the game if you hit them hard enough or in the right spot. Nothing malicious, but you're trying to crush these guys.
Yeah. And I think to that point, I think Tom Brady has even said this, and he's had this message for young quarterbacks, you trying to gain that extra 3 yards, is it worth the potential of you getting hurt and letting all your teammates down because now you're out of the game and they can't rely on you? That is what Jayden Daniels has to learn. But honestly, when you look at all the rookie quarterbacks, he's definitely performed the best. Now, they've struggled in the red zone, and honestly, I would like them to actually use his legs a little bit more in the red zone. Now, again, you worry about him taking hits because he's tough, and to Mike's point, he does not give up on plays. He's a competitor.
You scheme it up right, you can have a one-on-one.
Exactly. So I needed some RPOs to get him on the edge because he had 7 scoring drives last week. They all ended in field goals.
Yep.
He is yet to, if I'm not mistaken, throw a touchdown.
No rookie quarterback has thrown a touchdown.
But to Mike's point, the accuracy has not been an issue. Now, again, sometimes screens, and he's a big proponent. If the first read is open, he's going to take it. He's always going to take a positive gain if he can. And a lot of rookie quarterbacks need to learn from that. Right? Stay ahead of the chain. So you can't fault him for taking the first read if it's open. Take it. Now again, he hasn't been in too many scenarios where it's 3rd and 15 and stuff, and you would be like, all right, don't take the check down. If you have some time here, see if you can get to your 2nd, 3rd read and maybe thread something. Being smart with the football, right? Not being reckless with it, and he's usually never reckless with the football. But you can't get mad on him taking a profit when it's there, right? And that's what he does at a high level that other rookie quarterbacks could learn from. So my biggest thing is what Mike said, you can't take hits. Same thing with Caleb. You cannot take hits like this in the NFL. It's a 17-game season. Your body won't last through the whole season if you're taking hits like that.
The hits that are happening on Caleb, a lot of them are happening behind the line of scrimmage. For Jayden Daniels, some of these hits are happening at the line of scrimmage or down the field. Yeah. So it's the same messaging, but it's different conversations. For the Bears, it's you got to shore up the interior of that offensive line. And for the Commanders, I almost called him something else. For the Commanders, it's finding a way to get through to Jayden Daniels that you have to trade what you want in the moment, which is that extra 2 or 3 yards, for what you want the most, which is a season of success.
I will say, though, I think I already saw improvement from week 1 to week 2. Obviously, maybe a little easier opponent.
He's a baller.
Than the Giants,
he is. He's my offensive rookie of the year.
Good start. All right. Next one here. Early thoughts on the 2025 quarterback class. I think this one's going to me. Any potential risers? It's already draft season for the Giants. Sadly, I believe that is the case for the New York Giants. And my thoughts on this class, I don't think there's any, Caleb Williams, Drake May in this class that I saw this last year before the season. And then obviously Jayden Daniels joins kind of that tier as the season went along. And it is a long season, but I really like what I've seen from Cam Ward from Miami.
That's what I'm talking about, Mike.
If I'm like, if there's a guy where I'm like, I can pin my hopes to high-end possible quarterback play, it's him so far from what I've seen.
First time I saw him play was with you at my house, and you were like, this guy, Cam Ward, is very good at football.
He's just
different dude, man.
Talented. And when I think of guys who are kind of maybe rough around the edges, is like have things that they need to improve on technically or play like a loose brand of football, I want reasons for why they did that. And Cam Ward played 8-a-side football in Texas. He went to Incarnate Word for 2 years to start his college career. Then Washington State, he hasn't had the quarterback development that, Arch Manning has, or like these guys who Trevor Lawrence's of the world. So to see the year-on-year progress that we've seen every single year in this series, which has been balling out at Miami, that's the guy where I'm like, oh, I could see the trajectory going to the moon with him. I like Carson Beck. He's more of like a Jared Goff, Sam Bradford. He doesn't get me super excited, but I think he'll be a quality NFL starter.
I think he's dating that Miami basketball player too, one of them.
And
good for him.
Quinn Ewers has looked different this year than years past, the Texas QB. I'd put him in that mix as well for top 10 pick, but every single year now, 3 straight years as a starter, he got hurt. Yeah. Now it's an ab injury. It's not that supposedly not as serious as previously thought, but man, if a guy's getting hurt every single year, I would just lean to the guys who aren't, and he's not that big to begin with. So.
I got a question for you, Mike. In regards to Quinn Ewers in the injury history, say he's out for 2 more games.
Yeah.
And Arch Manning continues to do what he's been doing. Is there a real controversy there? And then how do scouts potentially look at this if he were to leave and maybe not play as much going forward for the rest of the season?
I think there is a controversy. Truly, just because Arch Manning looks that good and he brings that rushing threat that like, he can.
Is this what happened at Alabama with Jalen and Tua?
Yes, that was the same thing that happened. Yeah, in terms of like that was end of the season versus midseason.
I'm just starting to get into the college football thing. I know there's some history that I missed out on, but
but there hasn't been necessarily this where a guy can get like who could be a first rounder.
Correct.
Hype like that might get benched for a guy who's a higher end first rounder, right? So. I could see it. I could see it happening. And if I'm Texas, Steve Sarkisian, it's like you don't give a darn what the guy's draft stock is. You want the guy that's going to win. So,
win a championship.
So yeah, I could see it happening, but that would mean Ewers probably has to come back to school. You're not going to draft a guy who's
so he would transfer.
So he would transfer at that point. Unfortunately for him, but
I don't recognize this college game now, man. It's crazy.
Stay healthy, man.
All right, some red meat here for you, Kyle.
All right.
What's wrong with the Bears O-line? Break it down. I know there's like a dozen people that asked the same version of this question, so this one really got to the point. What the hell is really wrong with the Bears O-line?
First and foremost, you can't pick up basic games. Yeah. And when I say games, I mean
to demonstrate.
Yeah, I mean TE stunts, ET stunts, TTs, pick toughs. You can't pick them up. This is supposed to be the peeling bananas part of protection. We can work together. They're not on the same page, okay? The sets indicate to me that the coaching points that are pertinent have not been emphasized strong enough. Ooh. And I watched a brilliant breakdown by AQ Shipley on Twitter yesterday talking about a 3 across look, a loaded look.
Yep, load look.
A 5, a 3, and a 2-eye. Yep. And what that does is it presents opportunities for that defensive front to get the tackle, the guard, and the center on different levels. Yep. That's when hips get picked. And if, as a defensive lineman, if I set with any width on a look like that, you're licking your chops.
No question.
Because now I can pick you, you come around. The little things, the basic things that improve your quality of life, that are low effort things, are not getting done by the Chicago Bears. You got to set vertical. You got to help your buddy out. You got to drag arm transition. I'm throwing a lot of jargon out there, but I can tell you, I can see it in my head. The problem is they're not good enough, and they're clearly not coached well enough, because things that are coached show up on film. And when I watch a team like the Buffalo Bills, who I played for Aaron Cromer, the technique that I know in my sleep with my hands tied behind my back and my eyes closed, I could do the technique with my feet because it was ingrained in me so hard every day, so often. I don't see that with the Chicago Bears. I also think that obviously practicing is really important for Nate Davis. That's the first time I've said his name. I've said I wasn't going to say his name every week because I hate calling guys out.
Yeah.
It looks to me like you don't want to be out there. And that's a really tough situation to be in as a football player. I was there at the end of my career physically where I couldn't cut it and I just wanted to go home. I should have gone home instead of put that on film, because you're putting that on film and now you're putting that on your quarterback too.
Yeah.
Your quarterback who has been chosen as the number one pick, and we talked a great deal about, do you play him, do you sit him? Well, with this group, I'd say get our guy out of there because it's not going to get any better. Even, Darnell Wright, top 10 pick, big fan of Darnell Wright. There's some things that I saw from a technical standpoint that show me that nobody's trying to develop this young freak. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be coached in this league.
Yeah.
You have to practice in this league. You have to fix mistakes when you see them. And if I continue to see the same mistakes from this offensive line, it doesn't get any better for them. It doesn't get any better for the team. It doesn't get any better for Caleb Williams. And we're sitting here having this conversation every week.
Yeah.
Because I know they've had players in the past and they go elsewhere in the league. James Daniels, who's now on the Steelers. Yeah. He's one of the highest rated PFF guys last week. Lucas Patrick is the left guard on the New Orleans Saints. He was the highest rated Saint, I believe.
He's playing well now.
Are you kidding me? Football players, they're like sled dogs. They need to have a little bit of coaching. And man, then when you give them the coaching, you take your hands off and you say, we're doing the Iditarod, baby. We're doing this race. You can't even get the race started if the technique is bad.
One thing I'll
That's
add.
my opinion.
Tevin Jenkins, I went back to PFF, looked up his splits, right guard versus left guard. It's stark. He was so much better at right guard.
Right guard.
That's where he played
You
it.
put your two best guys next to each other, you create double teams. You can work half the field. You can work gap scheme. You can do a zone scheme on their side. But they bring Tevin Jenkins to the left side. Now he's a Braxton. It looks different. There's a disconnect between the right tackle
4 years at right tackle
and the left side of the football field.
He was a right side guy. And they put him left.
Perfect. I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because the same can be said for Braxton Jones for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, he's supposed to be the left tackle of the future.
Broderick Jones, I'm
sorry.
Braxton Jones. Yeah. I was like, that's my guy for the Bears.
Broderick Jones. Sorry about that. But they've been putting him at right tackle, right? And he's struggled mightily there. And they've been flipping him back and forth. And you know this, as an offensive lineman, when you're used to one side and you switch to the other side, it's like tying your hand behind your back. You got to do everything backwards, right? Your post leg is backward, right? Your kick leg is backwards. So it's just like, it's not an easy transition.
It's like wiping your ass with the other hand.
Exactly. It's not an easy transition for a young player.
Try it. It's hard. It's messy. It's almost as messy as what the Bears
exactly. So from a defensive perspective, and you talked about it a little bit, we're trying to get the offensive line on two different levels, right? And if the Bears continue to protect it the way they're protecting it, it's not going to stop. And then we talked about this last week, the double A gap mug from the Dallas Cowboys. Well, the Houston Texans kept walking a linebacker up in that A gap, right, to kind of dictate protection, right? And like you said, when you look at it, it wasn't like it was exotic, stunts they were running. It was either TT, two defensive tackles running a tom game, or the linebacker would pick and the D tackle would wrap around him. So it's essentially the same thing. You're just moving a D tackle out and putting a linebacker there. So it's just like, it's all about communication, like you said, depth in your sets and being on one page. And they just, the interior three just don't seem like they're on the same page.
Well, if you show that look as a defensive coordinator, or if you're, a captain on the D-line, you say, we're going to run a text stunt here, and you get home and you go back to the huddle, what are you saying?
Let's keep doing it until they stop it.
Let's keep doing it until they stop it. It's like that. I watch people on TikTok a couple weeks ago. It was the Chase money glitch. People were getting money out for free for the bank. First off, illegal, highly illegal. Don't try that. That's like playing defensive line against the Bears currently. It's like, oh, that worked. I just got $30,000 out of the ATM. Let's keep pulling the lever until they change it. They didn't change it. And the thing that sucks is I watched TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds go out there and run the same stunt over the center that was run against the Bears. And I know they practice against it. I know that somebody screwed it up in practice on the offensive line against the ones. And it probably wasn't fixed. And now you see it in the game, and these problems will continue to happen until you get somebody, whether it's a player or an assistant coach, that says, this shit isn't going to fly anymore, and we got to fix it. Because if we don't fix it, Caleb's either going to get hurt or he's going to be so behind the eight ball emotionally and mentally, we're going to be looking at a Bryce Young situation.
All right. That leads us great into this next question. Why are defenses so far ahead of offenses this season? I thought about this a lot, and it's obviously been something I've noticed a ton, week 1, week 2. To me, there's two big things that are really at play here. One is kind of defensive creativity around the league in terms of pressure package that we're talking about. Yeah. Sim pressures, blitzes. I remember
spinner looks
a decade ago, maybe like 2011, 2012. Mike Zimmer in the double A gap was like the peak of blitz creativity.
That was it.
If you don't have double A gap nowadays, you're
Mike
like
left,
way behind. Like they used it, but that was like, everyone's like, oh yeah, Mike Zimmer in the double A. It's like, that's commonplace throughout the NFL now. So I think the blitz creativity, sim pressures, Georgia was famous for this under Kirby Smart and how they use those linebackers to, they're rushing 4, but you don't know where those 4 guys are coming from. That's what a sim pressure is.
Yep.
That's the blitz creativity is off the charts this year, and everyone's using it. If you're not, you're falling behind. And then it's the combo coverages on the back end. I think Pete Carroll and the Seattle defense fooled a lot of people into believing there was a secret behind the cover 3 that they ran. And it was a little different how they ran it versus everyone else, and it kind of swept across the league. But the real secret was they had future Hall of Famers at linebacker, cornerback, and safety. That was the real secret to the Seattle cover 3.
Jimmy and the Joes,
they could have ran cover 4. They could have ran man coverage. Man. They just had a house of a defense that year. And a lot of people try to copy it. And you saw their DCs go throughout the league. And Gus Bradley just not have the success that Pete Carroll and that Seattle defense did because they didn't have the horses. But now you're seeing teams realize, if we don't have the horses in the secondary, let's just put my corner that stinks as a cloud corner, and he just plays the flat for me all day. And so you've seen kind of this massive increase in quarters, cover 6, which is 2 deep safeties and a quarter and a half field safety, like a cover 2 safety over the top of one side. And that's just everyone on base downs in the open field. That's what they're running nowadays. And so offense is just those explosive play action plays are not there because what was once, when you're running the Seattle cover 3, it's 3 deep zone, but you actually have 2 corners at the line of scrimmage that have to then cover their deep zones. Now it's 4 guys deep, right? Every single snap, or 2 deep safeties and a guy running in the middle of the football field. So everyone's trying to keep those explosive plays down. And with so many young quarterbacks, you don't have guys who are Tom Brady that can just do
what you give them.
What he did over the years against cover 2, which is just 6-yard gain, 6-yard gain, 5-yard gain, and just keep going down the football field. These guys aren't good enough. These guys aren't to that point
patient
yet.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think teams are patient enough, right? Everybody wants the big explosive plays.
Yes.
And we were talking about this with Patrick Mahomes. Like, sometimes you have to be a manager of the game and matriculate the ball down the field. And I think that's what made Bill Belichick and his defense so hard to go up against, because they weren't going to beat themselves. Like, if you were going to get it, you're going to have to earn it the hard way. 10, 11, 12 play drives.
Tired.
And people aren't usually consistent enough. Like you said, offensive linemen get tired. Do you get a false start, put you behind the 8 ball, behind the chains, right? That's what he kind of leaned on defense. I think that's what a lot of defenses are doing now, like with the too high shell look or even the umbrella coverages.
Don't break.
Exactly. Like, we'll hold them to 3, but most likely they're going to make a mistake around play 6 or 7.
Yep.
That puts them behind the 8 ball. We're going to get 3rd and long. We're going to get a sack, and they're going to have to punt the football away. So I think that's part of it too, as far as defenses just making quarterbacks and offenses earn it the hard way without making a mistake. And then also something that we've kind of talked about last week, offenses are going to take a little bit while to gel because they haven't played together. Like, these guys don't play in preseason games, right? So we saw the Jets kind of struggle on offense week 1, looked a lot better week 2. You would think that's going to continue to progress as they build more time together because, Mike Williams made a big catch late in that game to really set them up to win the game. But he didn't do any reps in training camp, right? So it's going to take time for him to gel with Aaron Rodgers to be implemented into the offense. And teams across the NFL, that's why usually the Chiefs start faster than everybody because they actually play in preseason games.
And the Kansas City Chiefs training camp is a real training camp.
Real.
There's only a handful of teams that go truly away for training camp now, and I'm not talking about Napa Valley or Oxnard. Come on. I'm talking about a place called St. Joseph's, Missouri, which if you've never been, the only thing going on is I think it's Southwestern Missouri State University. And the Chiefs, and when they go to camp there, they don't start it with a stretch line. They start it with a 7-man sled, like it's 1994, okay? And Andy Reid's out there standing on the sled, and they are beating and banging all day.
Facts.
And when it comes time for week 1, there's one team that's always ready. Granted, they lost against the Lions last year. But they are ready.
Travis Kelce
They're ready for a physical fight because they have conditioned themselves. They have calloused their minds and their bodies. And I think a big part of why these defenses are so ahead right now, particularly early in the season, is just because of that. You know, you're getting your real reps now in the early quarter of the season. Once we move into the second quarter of the season, that's when things start to catch up.
All right, there you have it. Sorry we couldn't get to more mailbag questions. I'll try my best to respond to ones we didn't get to on Twitter. And we'll try to hit some more next week. But fun show. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow on wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, wherever. Helps the show. We'll be back tomorrow previewing all the weekend's games. Until next time, keep pushing.